Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mishnapad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Ashtotar Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Naveen, can you come here a minute? You have to remember it's about this stand. Now lift it up and then pull that out and let the pull, no, yeah, that's it. See? That's it. Otherwise it's not a balance problem. That's for stand up kirtaniyas. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtapraya Shabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Okay, I did Om Namo. So, okay. On this 6th day of October, 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in Canto 8, Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creations, Chapter 24, Matsya, the Lord's Fish Incarnation. And we'll be reading text 39 of that chapter. And we'll be reading on, I think, to text 46, according to the sheet. Okay. Itam Adishya Rajanam Harir Antaradiyata So Andavaikshata Tam Kalam Yam Vishikesha Adishat Ittamadishya Rajanam Haradantaradhita Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat Ittamadishya Rajanam Haridantaradhita 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 Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat. Joseph. Ittamadishya Rajanam Haridantaradhita Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat. Ladies. Ittamadishya Rajanam Haridantaradhita Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat Ittamadishya Rajanam Antaradhita Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat Ittamadishya Rajanam Haridantaradhita Sondabhaikshatatam Kalam Yam Rishikesha Adishat So you got that word right. Rishikesha. We're so used to saying Rishikesh, but it's Rishikesha. Anyone online want to chant? Vijay must be on pilgrimage or something. Okay. Word by words. Ittam, as aforementioned. Adishya, instructing. Rajanam, the king. Satyavrata. Harihi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Antaradiyata, disappeared from that place. Saha, he, the king. Anvavaikshata, began to wait for. Tankalam, that time. Yam, which. Rishika Ishaha, Lord Rishikesha, the master of all the senses. Adishat, instructed. Translation. After thus instructing the king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead immediately disappeared. Then King Satyavrata began to wait for that time of which the Lord had instructed. Text 40, I'll just read the English. After spreading Kusha with its tips, Kusha grass, with its tips pointing east, the saintly king, himself facing the northeast, sat down on the grass and began to meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, who had assumed the form of a fish. Thereafter, gigantic clouds pouring incessant water swelled the ocean more and more. Thus the ocean began to overflow onto the land and inundate the entire world. As Satyavrata remembered the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he saw a boat coming near him. Thus he collected herbs and creepers, and accompanied by saintly Brahmins, he got aboard the boat. The saintly Brahmins, being pleased with the king, said to him, "O king, please meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Keshava. He will save us from this impending danger and arrange for our well-being." Then, while the king constantly meditated upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a large golden fish appeared in the ocean of inundation. Who wants to guess how long that fish was? 8 million miles long. Pretty long. The fish had one horn and was 8 million miles long. Following the instructions formally given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the king anchored the boat to the fish's horn, using the servant Vasuki as a rope. Thus being satisfied, he began offering prayers to the Lord. Text 46. The king said, "By the grace of the Lord, those who have lost their self-knowledge since time immemorial, and who because of this ignorance are involved in the material conditional life full of miseries." So there's a word missing here. Sorry, it's editorial. "By the grace of the Lord, may those who have lost their self-knowledge since time immemorial, and who because of this ignorance are involved in a material conditional life full of miseries, obtain the chance to meet the Lord's devotee. I accept that the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Supreme Spiritual Master." Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the Supreme Spiritual Master. The Supreme Lord knows everything about the suffering of the conditioned souls, and therefore he appears in this material world, sometimes personally, sometimes by an incarnation, and sometimes by authorizing a living being to act on his behalf. In all cases, however, he is the original spiritual master who enlightens the conditioned souls who are suffering in the material world. The Lord is always busy helping the conditioned souls in many ways. Therefore, he is addressed here as Paramo Gurur Bhavan, the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who acts to spread Krishna consciousness, is also guided by the Supreme Lord to act properly in executing the Lord's order. Such a person may appear to be an ordinary human being, but because he acts on the behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Spiritual Master, he is not to be neglected as ordinary. It is therefore said, Acharyam mam vijaniyat. This is Krishna speaking in the 11th canto, Uddhava Gita. And he says, an Acharya who acts on my behalf, or an Acharya who acts on the behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, should be understood to be as good as the Supreme Lord himself, as we sing every morning. Sakshat Daritvaina Samasta Shastraya Uktas Tatha Bhavyata Eva Sadbihi. Kintu Paboryak Priya Eva Tasya Vande Guroshi Charanara Vindam. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has advised that the spiritual master acting on the Supreme Lord's behalf must be worshipped as being as good as the Supreme Lord, for he is the Lord's most confidential servant in broadcasting the Lord's message for the benefit of the conditioned souls involved in the material world. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So we're seeing these quite amazing activities of the Matsya Avatar, expanding himself until he's 8 miles long, 8 million miles long, sorry. And we have obviously a situation which is similar to the Noah's Ark story in the Bible. But the Noah's Ark story doesn't have the presence of the Matsya Avatar, and doesn't have the presence of the Lord in the role of the Supreme Guru, which is what the whole point of this passage is. Satyavrata, being a very surrendered disciple, has taken the instructions of Matsya Avatar on his head, and he's following carefully and tying the boat to the horn of the Matsya Avatar. And now he's going to be pulled, I don't know how long, I think it's mentioned, it's many years. But, and so the whole idea of this passage is to understand the great benediction of having the Lord as the Guru. He's the internal Guru, as the Super Soul. It's explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and Lord Chaitanya's instruction in Sanatana Goswami, that because the conditioned souls are not listening and cannot really hear the transcendental instructions that the Super Soul is always giving, and the Super Soul comes outside as the realized Guru, and of course sometimes as an actual avatar, or as the books such as Bhagavad Gita. And we should always remember that the Srimad Bhagavatam also contains the Uddhava Gita, in which Krishna speaks in the 11th canto, and conclusive instructions to Uddhava about Bhakti, and just as Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita. So the key element for the conditioned soul is to come in contact with the devotee, either someone who's acting as an acharya or the acharya's representative, who can then bring him into the proximity of the words of the instructions of the acharya, either directly or through a medium such as a book, and that the living entity can finally be exposed to that instruction, that transcendental knowledge, that if he accepts it and tries to live by it, he can become delivered from his entrapment in the round of birth and death in Maya. And of course, it's pointed out numerous times in Prabhupada, in its purports classes and so forth, that all of the living entities, the 8,400,000 species, and the millions and billions and trillions of examples of them. I mean, how many mosquitoes are there in the world? Probably a lot more than human beings, right? And all these other insects. So that each one of them is a soul, a conditioned soul, intrinsically the same as we are. Najayate meyate vakadacha nayambudva bhavitava nabuya ajo nitya shashvatam purano nahanyate henyamane sharire. For the soul, there is never birth or death at any time. He hasn't come into being, is not coming into being now, will not come into being in the future. The souls are as Aja, Nitya, Shashvato, Yam Purana. Each one of those adjectives can be applied to Krishna. He's certainly unborn, He's certainly eternal, ever-existing, and primeval, but it's also applicable to every soul. So how have we come into this situation, life after life, suffering and being in ignorance, trying to enjoy and being entangled in Maya, and ultimately, how many times have we been around for that final, in the death of Brahma, when everything is pulled back into Mahavishnu, and we're still alive, but we're not conscious. We're in suspended animation for millions and billions of years. We've been doing that forever. So if we accept that and we see, whoa, now we finally have come in contact with the genuine Acharya who is giving us the knowledge, and his representatives also giving the same knowledge, leading through the books, of how we can revive our original nature. Each one of us is a child of God. We belong in the spiritual world. I wrote a paper, by the way, when this was an issue. I don't know if you were around. Whether we fell from the spiritual world or not. You remember that whole thing? It's practically, from day one, when you begin to read Prabhupada's books, or you had classes and so forth, it's not long before you're going to hear the phrase, back home, back to Godhead, right? Which can it be anything else but implying that we were once in the Godhead, we were once there with Krishna, and we fell down. It's like we have that verse, what is it, verse 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the Shikshastika, right? Ainanda tanu jikinkadam patitam mam vishame bhavam mudo kripaya tavapada pankada stitaduli sadasham bhajati. Your servant for eternity, I lost my true identity and fell into this horrid sea of birth and death, O Lord. O Nanda's son, please hear my plea. By your sweet grace, consider me a speck of dust upon your lotus feet forevermore. So for me, that's an indication that we fell from the spiritual world. Anyway, it was an issue, and I wrote all about it, showing how Prabhupada, he taught that, and he believed it. The people who were saying, doubting it, said, well, he taught it, but he didn't really believe it. We Westerners, we just couldn't take the idea that we were never in the spiritual world, which is silly. Anyway, it's not the kind of issue it was, back in 20 years ago. But that's a central point of our philosophy, that all of us are intrinsically Satchit Ananda. We're eternal. We're full of knowledge. We're full of bliss. But now, in our conditioned state, we're certainly not eternal. We're certainly not, full of unlimited knowledge. Basically, we're ignorant of almost everything. And what about that bliss? What happened to the bliss? Well, we try to find and search out counterfeit bliss, called sense gratification. Real Ananda means it doesn't end. That's the situation in the spiritual world. Ever-existing, ever-expanding happiness and bliss in relationship to Krishna, existing in our constitutional position as his servants, friends. The basic platform is service. If you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it describes in detail this teaching to Rupa Goswami, which then were embodied in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and the different rasas, right? So there's one rasa that basically Shanta ras, which is kind of preliminary. It said, what is the quality? You're always thinking of Krishna. You're completely satisfied in that way, just remembering him. You're never attracted to material desires, And there's, I think, a place for that, like the flute or something in the spiritual world. There's Shantaras. But the real platform where you start, experiencing Bhakti is Dasya Ras, as a servant. And his friends, they're servants. They're serving him more intimately and more pleasingly than those who are simply, feeling themselves as servants and always in that mood and in that relationship. Krishna enjoys when his friends, joke with him and insult him in friendly ways, and tease him. That beautiful painting, it's a pastime that Rupa Goswami gives in the Nectar Devotion, where Krishna has his eyes closed and there's a friend about to put a flower in his mouth. You know that one? Where there's all these sweetmeats, and they say, oh, close your eyes, Krishna, I'm going to give you really one of the special sweetmeat. So he's closed his eyes and, he'll put what is this? Flower. Can you imagine tasting a flower, So they're joking with him. They're treating him as an equal. He likes that. That's more pleasing to him than, always, Anyway, so that's the platform of eternal enjoyment. And we're now in the Damodar month, it starts tomorrow, but the ceremony starts today. And each day we sing that song, and we're meditating on wonderful, she chased after him and caught him and tied him up. The painting, there's kind of a little frieze of it. I forgot one thing. There's no mortar to tie him to. She's just tying him up. Anyway, study that. That's the painting right there. But anyway, so what is that? This is God. This is the unique conception of God, where what he enjoys more than anything is to have his loving devotees forget that he's God, and that treat him in the intimate way, full of love. The real commodity is love. That's what we're trying to reawaken. We've been putting it in all kinds of things, inanimate things. Now there's inanimate things that give you the sense of being animate. AI, there's a big problem with psychology going on out there, where people are having AI friends and even girlfriends and boyfriends, because they can act just like human beings. But there's no human relationship there. It's almost like a metaphor for what's going on, in the material world all the time. You're trying to deal with the material world or entities who are alive. It could be your children or whatever it is, or a dog, I could take my walk every day, the beloved dogs. And you're getting some reciprocation, the dog will nuzzle up to you and everything. But it's a very pale reflection, obviously, of the loving relationship with Krishna. And it ultimately disappoints. Dogs don't have very long lifetime, they die, and you're bereft of the dog, I remember the first time I visited New Vrindavan. I think it was in driving there, and there's a dog cemetery, believe it or not, where you can have, you can go visit the dog on Sunday, the cemetery, and remember the dog. It's part of the material disease. It's you become attracted to something that's similar to what you once had in the spiritual world. You forgot that. You wanted to be the enjoyer. And so it always disappoints, because the experience is temporary. I mean, we all know that from every sense gratification. You sit down to a wonderful prasadam feast. It's a fast day, a full fast day. Say Nrsimha's appearance day, where you fast until twilight, right? It's the evening. So it's a pretty long day of fasting, what to speak of Janmashtami. And prasadam is so nice, and you have the prasadam, and you're remembering Krishna. It's transcendental and everything, but you take one too many cups of sweet rice, a little bit too much halva or whatever it is, and then the next day you can't eat anything, or you don't feel well, right? That's the thing with sense gratification, and even if you do it very moderately, but you still like it, it'll bring you back to another birth. And then at that point, you may not be able to control it, or you'll be in a different body. So once you know these things, this is basic knowledge, right? Krishna begins with the transmigration of the soul. Dehinosminyata dehe. That's practically his first verse to Arjuna. So it should, if you really have faith that this is the truth. And let me just interject here a minute. How many of you are familiar with this book called Coming Back? Have you seen the book? It's one of our regular books. It was written in the 70s, actually. But there they have some examples of evidence, empirical evidence for transmigration. You know that? There's somehow, usually with Indians, but not always, the children, they'll remember things and say, you're not my real mother. I remember my real mother from the previous birth. And so this one scientist, Ian Stevenson, he actually went to India and he interviewed and he investigated and he confirmed that yes, 60 miles away. I mean, there was another town where indeed there was a person named that, and they died, or they were the mother, and he remembered that. And he did it with several instances. And then on YouTube you'll find also instances of that, often children who remember part of their past life, and it's confirmed. So anyway, that's a basic principle of faith for all devotees, obviously, that we lived before, that we've had previous life. And somehow or other, by maybe some good fortune and some agata sukriti from that life, we've come in touch with this genuine philosophy and with genuine acharyas and spiritual masters, Srila Prabhupada, and with Krishna. I mean, how many times I heard this lecture, I listened to a lecture, that when you read the Bhagavad Gita, you're there with Krishna on the battlefield. You're getting his association. And of course, you're getting Prabhupada's association also through his purports and everything. So this is what we need. It's that transcendental association, that Sangha, Sadhu Sangha. The supreme Sadhu is the Lord, the original Guru. And if we receive the knowledge with faith, that was explained, you were talking yesterday, I think, about your class. How do we receive this knowledge? Right at the beginning, the second verse of the Bhagavatam describes, I think it's Shu Shu Sho, or it says, Dharmak projat dikaita bhota padamode matsaranam satam vedyam vastava matta vastu shivadam tapatayon muladam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamanukhe King Vaparayishvara Sadyo Didyabadurtate to could be Shu Shu should be Tachana. That Shu Shu should be is kind of a variant of the word Shu Shu Sho, which Prabhupada translated in different ways, mostly as submissive oral reception or ardent hearing, not just superficial in one ear and out the other. But you're really receiving the knowledge as the most valuable thing, and you're doing your best to remember it. There's no law against taking notes, and reviewing, and yes, memorizing some of the most important verses you hear Prabhupada quote all the time. There have been several collections of Prabhupada's most quoted verses. I remember this one sannyasi, I forget his name now, he compiled, the Veda base. If you look up in the Veda base, you look up Sarvadharma Parityajya, and it'll be so many times, maybe 800 times quoted, in the books and lectures and everything. And so he compiled these, and the ones that were most quoted was first, and there were a total of 180. There's a total of 180 Prabhupada quoted. And he has, the little first couple of words of the verse, and then he has there's a reference there, and there's another part of the paper that has the whole verse with the transliteration, synonyms, and translation. And of course, if you want to get the purport, you can look in the book itself. But it's good to memorize these. The first one we know already. The verse quoted most often. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He has the file. I forget the second one, but the first 10 we've heard a million times. So these are the verses Prabhupada quoted, and he would, to back up, to support his philosophical points. And it's if you have the facility, the brain power, and we memorized so many things when we were in third grade, right? We had to memorize. I remember working on the multiplication tables. Did we have to memorize it? What's 9 times 9? Oh, you immediately it's 81, right? So memorization is a good practice. And what's great about it is that if you work on these, then when you're trying to convince someone of Krishna consciousness, one-on-one, or you happen to be giving a class, or just for your own edification, you can meet with your friends and your fellow devotees, and read some passage in Prabhupada's book and say, okay, what's some verses that support this? And it's a very enlivening way of dealing with the Shastra, and it becomes very attractive. And you read in the Nectar of Devotion, it's a very potent way of purification. The intelligence, strengthening the intelligence. Don't forget, at the end of chapter 3, very important section of the Gita, Arjuna asks, what is it that forces us to do things that we know are bad for ourselves? Atakena puyuktoram papam charati purusha anichan apivarshanaya baladivi niyojita. Anichan means even against our will. It's almost like addiction, right? I know I shouldn't take this, but I can't, my body is telling me to smoke a weed or something, This is addiction. So what is Krishna's answer? Who knows the next verse? Very famous word. Kama. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava. The mode of rajas, the mode of passion, manifesting as kama, a very strong desire, sex desire, but also anything that which when frustrated, it's transformed into anger. And when you can't express your anger, you're frustrated, and you turn it inward, you become depressed. That's part of it, So Krishna gives a direct answer. And, then he describes, and this attachment is what is keeping us here. This is the transformation of love of God. Prema becomes kama when it's focused on the things in the material world. So how to purify it again? How to sublimate that kama? Because there's another verse describing the importance of greed. Now, greed is another corollary of lust, right? Lust, anger, and greed. These are the enemies of the world. 16th chapter, you read about the end of it. So, but greed is good. This is phrased in a long time movie I saw before I joined. But not material greed, but greed for Krishna. Krishna Bhakti Dasa bhavitamati kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate tattalalyam avimurli mekalam janmako dishakatayana labhyate. Naveen is nodding, he knows this verse. Right? No? He wants to know. This is a verse composed by Ramananda Roy and included in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and quoted in the CC. Very important. So, first of all, the first line is where Prabhupada got the phrase Krishna consciousness. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati. Bhavitamati means the mind absorbed in Krishna Bhakti Rasa. The pleasure, the transcendental pleasure of actually acting in your relationship with Krishna, your innate relationship, our original relationship. So Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavitamati. Kriyatam, buy it. Kriyatam yadikatopi labhyate, if you can find it in the market, And then what's the price? Tatra laulyam abimulyam. Mulyam means price and laulyam means greed. In other words, the only price is your intense desire for it. Tatra abimulyam ekalam. Millions of births of pious activity, you won't get it. It's because that's a material thing. So how do we get that greed? How do we develop the desire to be fully Krishna conscious? So much so that we're really ready to give up so many things that we're habituated to now, and take on things that we wouldn't ordinarily do, in our conditioned state. That's what bhakti means. Anukulyena sankalpa partikulyasa bharjanam. Accepting those things favorable for devotional service and giving up those things unfavorable. Those are the first two steps. One of the favorable things is attending Srimad Bhagavatam class. Mangalarti, all the morning program, very important. So that greed, that a strong desire, is what the whole creation of Krishna conscious society is all about. Part of it is the beautiful deity worship, where you can actually see Krishna as he is, and the more we do that, we really have faith that he's there. We offer prayers to Krishna, to the deity. The deity is receiving the prayers, And prayer is so important. We're chanting this Hare Krishna mantra. It's a prayer. Prabhupada explained. It's a prayer to Radha and Krishna, please engage me in your service. So when we chant with that prayerfulness and with the great attention and concentration, that is efficacious prayer. That will actually purify us most powerfully and evoke Krishna's mercy to give us more and more advancement. So plus, so many wonderful prayers in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Queen Kunti's prayers, Bhishma's prayers, Vritrasura's prayers, Uddhava's prayers. When he visits Vrindavan, Krishna tells him to go there, What is his main prayer? He says, because he meets the gopis there and he witnesses their, supreme consciousness of love and separation from Krishna. And so he says, and he says that these gopis have achieved the ultimate goal of life. So I really want to get the dust of their feet, but I'm afraid to directly ask them. So let me just take birth as a little creeper in Vrindavan, and when they walk, maybe they'll sprinkle some dust on me. When you contemplate that, the consciousness, the humility, and this appreciation. So this is how we advance. That we look at the passages that we're reading in the Bhagavatam, and they all involve a similar thing, is that you have the devotees, is Satyavrata here, is being blessed because he's so submissive and he's receptive to the order of the Supreme Lord in the form of Matsya, and he knows, he trusts Satyavrata to really do it, because it's important for the survival of all these species and everything for the next creation. So he's receiving this. Now Satyavrata Muni, am I wrong, Ram? Didn't he write this Damodarashtaka? He's the author of Damodarashtaka. That's amazing. That would then, but Satyavrata here, now Damodarmata are going to sing his song. Now just see the contrast. The Damodarashtaka, he's meditating on this wonderful intimate relationship of Yashoda and Damodar and Krishna, Whereas it's what a contrast with this scene here, the devastation, the 1,000,000-mile-long Matsya, and being in this boat, and somehow surviving, But it's the same individual. So anyway, this, but here's, this describes the attitude. He's accepting, and I think this is the last one when I read 46, accepting the Lord as the supreme spiritual master. And isn't that the beginning of the Gita? That's where it really starts, where Arjuna stops arguing with Krishna, because he's trying, he wanted to, instead of pleasing Krishna's senses at the beginning, he wanted to please his own senses by not fighting. But so he came up with this kind of shastric, he's referring to the Vedas. If all the men are killed here, then the women will be without protection, then there'll be Varna Sankara, and I'll be responsible, and even the Pitas, the Pitris won't get their proper Shraddha ceremony, and I'll be responsible for the degradation of the family, and so I'll go to hell, What's the percentage? Let me go off to the forest and become a beggar, But he realized it wasn't proper, Krishna wasn't agreeing with him. And so finally he says, karpa nidosho pahata swabhava, this miserly weakness of mine has resulted in me losing my real nature. Karpa nidosho pahata swabhava, as a Kshatriya. I've lost my will to fight, my desire to fight, which is a disaster at that point. And so, Prichami tvam dharma samudacheta. I'm bewildered about what my real duty is. It's such a critical thing in the Vedic culture. What is the right thing to do? What is the dharma? What is the proper thing and the most efficacious and auspicious? So he says, I've lost that now. So I'm asking you, yakshe yaksyan nishchitam bruhit. Please tell me for sure, nishchitam, how I can achieve my good fortune, shreya. Shishyasteham shadima. I'm no longer acting in the role of your friend. I'm your shishya. Shishyasteham shadimam tvam papannam. I surrender unto you, Lord. Changes the whole relationship. And then, 2 verses later, Krishna starts speaking the Bhagavad Gita. Ashocana bashocana. He chastises him. You're lamenting for what is not worthy of grief. The material body. Those who are wise lament for the living and the dead. And there's a whole lesson about the soul and transmigration there in the 2nd chapter. So Arjuna changed, and we also have to change in that way. I don't know what's best for me. I'm so fortunate to have come into the proximity of these sources of real knowledge, Prabhupada's books, the temple, and archives. Go. I mean, I assume all of you know of this site called ISKCON Desire Tree, right? You've heard of it? Yeah. I remember I first. It's just the real treasure there is all the audio. All these hundreds and I don't know, maybe even thousands of verses of classes now, by the leaders, Shivaram Swami and all these, and some of the Bhajanaraya Swami's on there. By mistake, they even put some of my classes on there, and silly, But it's really a desire tree, you can get so much. So you can visit a million sites, and billions of people are visiting other sites. And going and falling deeper into Maya. But if you visit that site and dandavats.com and other ISKCON sites, you can be really enlivened. You can get on Mayapur TV. There's a friend of mine, he attends Mangalartik in Mayapur every day by visiting that site. In the evening, it's the morning over there, and he attends Mangalartik in Mayapur. So we have all the facility for becoming purified and advancing. We just have to have the desire to do it and the determination to kick out all the impediments, the bad habits of laziness or material desire. So these accounts of the different avatars of Krishna are a special kind of inspiration. And we're very fortunate to have it translated here by Srila Prabhupada. Okay, I'm sorry I got way over. Any questions or comments? Mukunda? So many mics.
I have two kind of trivial questions. One is in the purport, that one purport you read, and Srila Prabhupada writes that Krishna appears in the material world. So talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, out of mercy for the ignition souls, he appears in this material world, sometimes personally, sometimes by an incarnation, and sometimes by authorizing a living being to act on his behalf. So small question, but typically when I talk, and I think when many devotees talk about Krishna appearing personally, they don't just mean as his original form Krishna, but as any avatar. But so here personally, and then sometimes personally, sometimes by an avatar, sometimes by an incarnation. Is that the distinction there? That personally just means in his Krishna form, and incarnation means everything else? Because I would have thought personally would have covered all the incarnations. I typically use it as that.
Yeah, it's Prabhupada may use that language in different ways in different times, and usually when he's talking about Krishna appearing as himself, as Krishna, it's quite clear, and he may use that phrase personally, but I think from the context you can usually figure out, what it is. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the language. I'd probably use the language sometimes a little flexibly. So the same phrase may mean something in different contexts. It's always the context that matters. But here he's appearing in a personal form as the fish, but it's obviously not the original personal form.
Okay. The other question is, with this description of Matsya, and he's described here as 8 million miles long. And we understand this to be happening on Earth.
Yeah.
And so in that case, that would mean that he is appearing in a form that's maybe close to 100 times larger than the Earth. So how, at least, have you ever come across, I know there are different versions, Ugrasena's soldiers and so on, but with this one, I'm wondering if, over the past 50 years, have you come across anything, any way of explaining that, understanding that, any reference, any...
No, this particular one. He quotes Vishwanath Chakrabarti here. Prabhupada is also reading those commentaries. When you get into these distances and everything, I remember when the fifth canon came out, big devotees were scratching their head, I mean, how does this really work out? We're in Jambu Dweep, but the Jambu Dweep is described not as a globe really, but as kind of a big area. And it was really, how can I put it? Well, I wasn't thinking of that, but the devotees, did have problem with that. But also, it was a tremendous effort to edit that. That was part of the marathon. And Jayaveda Swami, he did a yeoman job with Pradyumna, working on the Sanskrit and what it means and the different numbers and so forth. The Prabhupada was often not going to get hung up on all the calculations, and he left that to his editors to figure out. So there are so many things. This is one of them that says, well, that really doesn't compute according to what, the Earth itself is only 24,000 miles in circumference. So how do we get 8 million miles long? Which is based on the length of 8 miles for the yojana. And that also you find there's different values for that given sometimes. So I long ago decided that I wasn't going to try to get hung up on that, because that would somehow I would understand the meaning and how that works at a certain point. But I mean, the geography and the things mentioned in the fifth canto are often a stumbling block, and we lost some devotees who just couldn't accept it. They said, this doesn't compute. I'm leaving. But I said, I'm not going to let myself get into that. Somehow it'll become clear. I mean, I can try to write some of my consultants and see if we can work it out. If you want to, drop me a note and explicitly what the question is.
One thing, I suppose I was speaking imprecisely too, because when I said that Matsya being 8 million miles long would mean, almost 100 times the size of the Earth, that's based on, kind of modern consensus of like the size of the Earth. Yeah. So I don't know how that would compare, though, to Shastra's description of the size of the Earth. I don't know. Do you know? I know that because, of course, some numbers add up when you compare Shastra to modern consensus, but many don't.
A lot of them don't. Yeah.
So maybe this is one of those where maybe it would be less, in some way less impossible, or like less inconceivable or impossible.
And even if you look it up in the dictionary, even the length of a yojana is not, so
not
8 miles. It's one version.
Right.
So I decided long ago not to get.
I mean, I also don't get hung up on philosophically, but I guess in terms of philosophy is one thing. Another thing are just clear statements that seem to be not improvable, but not unprovable, but I don't know. Just seems to conflict with everything you're seeing. So it's like one thing is like philosophy, and this is kind of an element where it's just not adding up, not philosophically, but just empirically. Yeah. It's just not adding up empirically. So, and many things, I'm also willing to. Some things are inconceivable, and some things it's pretty conceivable. It's just inconceivably doesn't seem possible. So, just wondering. So I'm not asking if does this trouble your faith or anything, but really because some things like Sariputta Prabhu and other devotees, they've contributed some different idea. Okay, well here's an idea consistent with Shastra, but different perspective, using Shastra as a reference for how to make sense of this. And that's how, and many devotees when speaking about the cosmos, they use Sariputta's perspectives as if it's just like clearly the way to interpret Shastra so that it adds up and we can conceive of it. So I'm wondering if there are any opinions that you've come across when it comes to this one.
I mean, it's interesting. The first book I worked on when I came here was Vedic cosmology and cosmography, I think, And I mean, working on means I didn't even have a computer. I was working at this devotee named Sarva Satya, and he was working on his computer and trying to. I mean, I wasn't trying to doubt or confirm some of the things he was doing, but I saw that he was making an effort to really make it understandable and how it could fit together, which is, and after all, they're going to build that Vedic planetarium.
But a lot of devotees are not happy because a lot of people think that they're going with one interpretation and going another.
I know. You know how that involved? I mean, I don't know if you ever heard this, Balaram. Oh, you would know, Ramapati. One thing I heard, and you can confirm or deny this, that at the time when Prabhupada decided to do that planetarium part of the temple, there was a communist government in Bengal, and they weren't so into the big temple, but the planetarium, that's. And so because of that, to get permission or something, to get approval,
So they did it in small. It's supposed to be what Prabhupada laid the foundation is much bigger, just behind the whole thing.
The planetarium.
Yeah, supposed to that's what Prabhupada wanted. Right?
I mean, did he really want that, or was it because that would enable them to?
The present land is very small.
Yeah.
But they had a bigger piece of land there, wouldn't give permission. So
I see. Yeah.
They could get for the small, where the fountain.
I really wonder when the whole thing opens, how much time the devotees are going to spend in the planetarium side. I mean, I'd rather go see those beautiful deities and the Shringadev and everything. Anyway.
One small thing, just because you brought up the planetarium, that actually was on my mind when asking that question too, because with the planetarium, it is somewhat of a controversy in ISKCON, with different people in ISKCON who have studied the matter, and some feel that or some are concerned with, or maybe now they're just upset with it because they know what it's going to look like. But at least years ago, they were concerned with how it was potentially going to be made, the planetarium. And their concern was that the decisions may be made so that the planetarium reflects an interpretation which is more consistent with the modern scientific consensus. And so some felt like, well, one, that seems, some were arguing that seems to conflict with Srila Prabhupada's desire for the planetarium, not just to be like, look, a planetarium that fits your model, but our conception of the cosmos.
That was the whole purpose, right?
So, but then part of the concern then is that if you try to fit the planetarium to fit at least as much as possible without completely, kind of dismissing Shastra, if you try to do that, then we may then open ourselves up to being more contradictory when it comes to other things in Shastra which fit the more one perspective of the cosmos, and does not, and really look contradictory when you try to make the more kind of modern version or modern interpretation perspective on the Vedic cosmos. So I was thinking about this. Is this, when asking, okay, the circumference of the Earth, as we understand it, as we grew up understanding it, is 25,000 miles. Is the Vedic perspective different, which would make it less impossible, this Matsya avatar? I don't know. But at least there were some concerns years ago that at least if you go one route, we're going to open ourselves up to looking more inconsistent with our own Shastra. So that's why it was on my mind. I didn't happen to bring it up, so I mentioned that.
Yeah, I don't know. To devotees, there have been devotees that I've known who tripped up, on the fifth canto and all of these things, and it's kind of irreconcilable things that in terms of the cosmography, and it damaged their faith, and they eventually left. So I don't want to do that, but it's worth looking into and seeing, if I can find some papers that have been written on it, things that might help to reconcile it. Okay, we've gone way over. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.